So, Ida, it's great to have you back. I know we talked about immigration, so many cool things before the new president. Now, our president is here, and I want to chat with you what's happening in the market. Technology is here. There are a lot of questions keep coming up about AI, how AI is being used by USCIS. I was doing some research. It's fascinating because when I read articles that how immigration government authority, they're using machine learning algorithm, and also now they started using AI. So I think there's a huge overlap between the humanity, technology, and the overall the concerns about AI. And I'm sure that you are also witnessing something as you are one of the experts in this space. So either what I want to accomplish, as you know, there are a lot of H1 visa holders, there are a lot of technologists, they are my audience. They want to know in what direction US is going, what's coming up, and also how this immigration, which Trump is implementing all these new laws, where do we stand? So there's a lot of confusion, and I think it will be great if you could just introduce yourself. What do you do? What's your background?
Okay, great. I absolutely agree with you. My name is Ayda Akalin. I'm an immigration attorney and strategist, and I work, as you mentioned, with a lot of foreign nationals, technology companies, and immigrants. And I think my work is sort of in that cross section that you mentioned. So it's something that I've been seeing a lot, especially the past couple of years, and it's sort of been supercharged the past year with respect to USCIS and the various agencies and what technologies they're using. I mean, obviously, AI is everywhere. We're kind of in the boom of AI, and it has not. It has also come into government and immigration enforcement and decision making. Now, a lot of what the government is implementing is kind of they're piloting certain programs. A lot of it is secret. We don't have access to all of it. But I mean, even as a practitioner, we can see some of the changes. And I think one of the things that I kind of think of when I'm thinking about AI and the government's use of it and how things are changing is that I think, the border is no longer a physical wall. It's an algorithm.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I think about it, because before you'd think of it as the border just being a wall, a line, the immigration officer itself. But now the government is using all kinds of technologies to properly filter and sort through foreign nationals and candidates and applicants and assess essentially like risk assess and score them. And while I think there's benefits to that, there's also a lot of issues that we're seeing, especially since we're in these pilot stages, because it kind of overreaches in certain ways. And we're seeing errors that come up. We're seeing a lot of requests for evidence, for example. We'll submit petitions to USCIS and we'll obtain a request for evidence. And you can tell that thing was written by AI. I mean, we used to call it boilerplate. They've always had boilerplate in their RFEs. But now it's kind of more nuanced and it's AI, and they're detecting patterns in the beneficiary's background, and they're using that to kind of give them like a score and then automatically flag this one for a request for evidence without actually reviewing the petition necessarily on its merits.
Yeah. I actually have a very good friend. He works for USCIS. And I was talking to him, and he said, so basically he's on the technology side. And he said his leadership is asking to use AI more to implement the automation. And end goal is that how can we process more data quickly so that we can start processing these applications quickly using AI. So ultimately, it goes back to the productivity gains from the USCIS perspective. Now, so when I started asking him, I said, listen, I mean, sure, technology is great. The intent is great, but now we are playing with human lives. So the bias and so, for example, I'm Indian, and now let's say if I'm from Pakistan and I have a Muslim name, I don't know how these machine learning algorithms, how AI is gonna take that information. So there's a lot of things involved behind the scene. So when you talk to your clients and when you're processing their data and when you're submitting their data, do you go through all that in your mind that, okay, my God, behind the scene, USCIS is going to use AI or technology to process this application, how it's going to look like, or I should be adding extra details to this application so that when system reads it, has full context about it.
Absolutely, I do. And I tell them, and it's not a comfortable conversation, but I say, listen, their job is to legally stereotype you. And as your attorney, I'm going to also explain that so that we're prepared for it, because that is what is happening. The algorithms now and these systems now decide who's getting the visa, who's getting flagged for a request for evidence. And I think this is especially true for Indian foreign nationals. We've seen over the last couple of years a uptick. There's been an uptick in requests for evidence for Indian foreign nationals applying for EB1s and O1s, the Einstein visas,
Hmm.
or where if if the candidate is from India, I tell them, like, your chances of a request for evidence are higher because they're going to say, you are just a cog in a machine working at Amazon or working at big tech. How are you special? Like, why do you qualify for an EB1? And one of the reasons that's happened is because there was an influx of applicants after the layoffs a couple of years ago. There were so many layoffs in tech. Everyone started to think, you know what, I need to maybe figure out how to self-petition and self-sponsor. I should sponsor myself for a national interest waiver green card or an EB1 Einstein visa that doesn't require an employer. So there was an increase in Indian foreign national applicants applying for these visas, which got fed into their system. And then they now triggered extensive reviews of people from India. And it's just not fair to everyone because now they're just assuming if you have an Indian sounding name, you're going to be put in this bucket of not really qualified, just trying to get out of the H-1B, debacle that they're in. Similarly, I mean, during the first administration, I had a lot of clients from the Middle East and North Africa. And especially when you're working with Middle East, I'm like, well, I got to tell you, you're going to have extra questioning, additional quote unquote vetting because of you're being from a Muslim country.
Hmm.
So you have to prepare for that. So there is the system legally stereotypes you and then they feed it. But now what's kind of dangerous is they're feeding it into these programs that automatically are flagging the person and casting them into this bucket there's not a human in there like checking for these. At the end of the day, a human needs to go in there and understand the nuance between this person from Jordan and this person from Jordan, this Indian foreign national and this one. Like, not everyone is the same. So while it feels efficient, like in the short term for them, because they're doing this numbers game, I think in the long term, it's going to cause a lot of backlog. It's going to make things worse before it makes things better.
So these customers, these clients who come to you, do they know that USCIS is using machine learning and AI behind the scenes?
A lot of them don't. I mean, some of them do, though. I work with a lot of engineers and people in tech. That's kind of a really large portion of my client base. And I've actually had clients who work for companies where they're selling the programs to USCIS. So they actually are aware of some of it. And some of them have even worked on these contracts and they're private. So it's just the irony is wild to be like desperately trying to get your O1 visa or your H1B visa renewed. And at the same time, you're like, I'm literally building the software. I'm contributing to the software that's supposed to make this system more accurate and have better fraud detection and whatnot. But of course, I try to explain it to them because I think it's important for them to know, especially when they see a request for evidence. Some of those are just random and they're nonsensical. If you look at the data we submitted, they don't necessarily match the evidence. And I say, listen, these are boilerplate. A lot of these are now AI. I've also seen with colleagues where they get requests for evidence and in their RFE, it'll accuse them of using AI to produce the immigration documents that they submitted. I'm not really sure where that's going, but they have those too. They're like, this is an AI generated letter. They
Wow.
have AI detectors that they're using. Yeah.
So in your case, so when you see an application, again, I think literally everybody is using Copilot, ChatGPT, or some kind of large language model. Now, do you see applicants coming to you, filling out their application using AI?
Yes, particularly in the kind of self-serve market, there's people that are like, I don't need an attorney, I'm going to do this myself. And now with AI, like it's definitely closed that gap.
Hmm.
You could get a lot of the things you need using AI. It's just that if everyone's doing it, it all looks the same. Like you can tell from a mile away and the nuance is really lost. And I think the thing that it doesn't solve for is the bigger picture strategy that the client needs. Like it's not just, I need my O1 visa. It's like also my children are aging out. They're going into college. They're not going to be eligible to join my petition for the green card. Also, I was born in a country that's got a quota and I have 5 international trips planned that the AI isn't going to be able to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
in that bigger picture. So there's a limited use for it. I'm not opposed to AI. I use it all the time. I mean, I find it really interesting, but I do think it has its limitations. And I also think we just don't have guardrails on it just yet.
Nice. And this is where my startup comes into the picture. And another thing which I'm learning nowadays a lot, that a lot of leaders, they come into these conversations, into the meetings, which I call it AI garbage inbox. So, you have an idea, you are working on a project, you want to build a strategy, you just go to ChatGPT, dump that English, and then let ChatGPT create the whole plan. Literally, people are just doing copy and paste of those plans, coming to the meetings. And I just told everybody, said, guys, we are just wasting each other's time because, we all coming from 25, 30 years old background in the enterprise, into the IT, into the tech. We should put our own thought process into those documents. So what I'm seeing a pattern that there's a AI garbage being created, which is wasting a lot of time. Quick, so I'm going to actually pivot our discussion really quick. I want to learn from you what's happening in the market. We have a new president, and what's happening, what may happen in future, because I have a lot of friends in India, and they want to come to the country, but they want to hold on for next 3 to 4 years. They want to see how the new regulation being applied, how that impacts, and then they want to apply for visas. So either please enlighten me personally. Like, I came here through H1, and for me, I think 25-year-old process I know. So what's happening nowadays?
Well, the H-1B process that you went through is, in certain ways, it's quite different now than it was when you went through it. And in others, it's the same. It's still stuck in that 1990s logic. Like, they really haven't updated the important parts of the regulations that they should. They haven't modernized it. But what they have done is added additional restrictions, additional vetting, additional scrutiny. As I'm sure you know, we chatted about it. There was the presidential proclamation in September with a $100,000 fee on H-1B visas. That really shook everyone, brought out so much fear. I got so many panicked phone calls and texts. And when the CEOs of companies are calling me, it's a problem because they're worried about their team and they're like, how do I support them? These people are my talent pipeline. They're building the product. So if I'm worried that they went to visit their grandmother in India, or they were in a trip to Australia for their honeymoon and they can't get back in, like, this is going to be a huge problem for our operations and for recruitment. So I think the direction that we're going is, honestly, it's problematic. Like, I understand, with $100,000 proclamation, like, they just made it so broad and then they had to walk it back multiple times and narrow it down to the point where I don't understand what the point of that was. I think what they really should have done is, like, look, there is fraud and some misuse of the H-1B visa program, particularly with respect to third-party placement companies, the body shops or the job shops, as you call it. They should regulate those. But the way this was written, it applied to everybody, and the people who got hurt by it the most were actually startups and small businesses who can't even afford this fee in the first place.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny because funny in a way that when this whole thing was happening, I think it was like Thursday, Friday, and then there was a lot of confusion in the weekend. I know you and I, we were texting too and talked about it, and I was replaying that if 25 years ago, if I was going to go to my employer, and if my employer had to pay $100,000 to bring me here, he or she was just going to say no, because the ultimate goal is cost saving, right? And that did cause a lot of confusion. And I think another question was that now, let's say I'm on H1 visa, let's say I'm visiting my family. Now, if I want to come back, do I still have to pay, or is just one-time fees when I come here on day one on my H1 visa? I hope all that is clear. Is it all clear, or what's going on?
I mean, they walked back a lot of it.
Hmm.
If you've already been counted against, because it was also in the middle of the lottery system. This thing came out in September, and October 1st is when the new H-1Bs, for those who've gotten approved, kick in. So it was terrifying for people, to be honest. People were booking flights. They didn't know if it applied to them because they had the H-1B approved, but it didn't have not gotten their visa and their passports yet. So there was so much confusion. They walked it back and said, if you've already had the visa or you applied and it was approved, it doesn't apply to you. And then they said it doesn't apply for extensions. And then they kind of didn't exactly explain whether it applies for changing your employer, but technically you've been counted against the cap. So they essentially whittled it down to where it applies to new H-1B lottery registrations for 2026, which is strange, and then nonprofits. who are cap exempt. And I'm like, what did they do? Like, do you think nonprofits can afford a $100,000 fee if tech companies can't? Like, so that's where we stand right now. But I honestly don't know that it's going to even be enforced by the time March comes around, the new H-1B season. Yesterday, the Department of Commerce filed a lawsuit. It's a big deal on this very issue. And so, there are a lot of business interests right now that are aligned against this fee because it's a tax. What it's saying is, you know what? Yeah, forget being based on merit. This is a tax. Because the other thing that happened was the same day that this proclamation came out, the Trump card also was announced. You pay $1 million, or if you're a
Yeah.
corporation, $2 million, you get a green card. They didn't explain like where it goes into the classification systems. Executive branch can't create new categories of green cards. They need Congress to do this. But what it was just signaling is we're moving away from merit-based system to a pay-to-play system and putting a tax on things. And I don't think that's really the direction that we should be going as a country. If we're trying to be like bring, America first, we need to innovate here. We want those companies to build here because we want to own the intellectual property of these companies. We want it to be American based. We want the employees to be here instead of having them. Now people are considering moving to other countries. The same time that this happened, just this month, China rolled out their own visa. They have a new visa that is like an H-1B, but with very little restrictions so far. It's the K visa. You can come in, work on your startup. You don't even need a company to sponsor you. You just work in STEM, and they're just rolling out the red carpet. So do you think someone who's studied here, they went to MIT, they went to a top school in engineering, or they happen to be from maybe India or Europe, Middle East, whatever, they're having a really difficult time on the H-1B visa. Do you think they're going to stay here, or they're going to go back home to their home country? Or maybe they're going to go to China because China is like, here you go, welcome, come build here.
Yeah.
And so I really think it like goes against the president's policy. If we're trying to compete with China and AI, like, I don't know that this was the way.
Yeah. I mean, my personal opinion, it's very impulsive, and a thought comes in and suddenly things changes overnight. And I'm a huge fan of empathy. So I always wonder, if I'm in your shoes and if I have, 100 plus clients, and they're calling me next day and asking me the same question over and over, and you are also not clear because it's so new for you. It's like, somebody tweets and then you suddenly thinks about, oh, what just changed, right? So I want to actually, again, going back to empathy, let's say I apply for H1 visa, I get rejected. I want to know why. I want full transparency. Do you think that USCIS has the system is transparent enough where they give you all the details why you were rejected? And then do they make it easier to reapply? How the whole process looks like in the current situation?
So if you get a denial, you will get a decision, and the decision outlines legally the reasons they denied your application. But again, sometimes it's vague and it's just kind of boilerplate. Like, you didn't meet the requirements. Your position isn't a specialty occupation. It's like, okay, well, tell me more. Why isn't it? How can it become one? Like, what do I need to know more about why? So they'll give you the general, bare minimum legal reasons for the denial. But what they won't tell you is things like, well, your petitioner is a small company, and we kind of flagged that because it's a smaller company and we just had some suspicions about it. Your attorney maybe doesn't have a great track record, and we feel like they always submit sketchy petitions, so we assumed yours was, so we kind of put it in this bucket. Those things you really don't know. Occasionally we'll submit Freedom of Information Act requests, like a FOIA request, to get the file and see what they have, especially when there's like a border incident when they come at CBP. But what happens is a lot of times, a lot of it is just redacted. It's just blacked out for national security purposes. So you don't get a lot. It's like a file with just a bunch of blacked out, redacted boxes. So you get a little bit of information, but it's not really enough to know what is happening behind the scenes. And at the same time, what's interesting is when your case is approved, you also don't know why. You don't know like what criteria it was approved on, especially when we're submitting like EB1s and Os. There's a list of criteria. You need to hit 3 out of 10 to get accepted, right? To hit the bare minimum. But you don't know which 3 criteria or more they accepted. So sometimes we'll get approvals. Clients will be like, which ones did they accept? And I'm like, I honestly don't know. The only way I know is when there's a denial or an RFE, because then they'll say this one wasn't accepted. This one was accepted. But once it's approved, you don't know. So I can guess what it was, but I think that's a problem too, because it's hard to advise a client unless you've been doing this for years. I always tell my team, like, we learn from RFEs. That's the best
Mhm.
teaching tool. Denials and RFEs. Now, you don't want a lot of denials and RFEs, so it's like game. But even with amongst my colleagues, whenever someone has a really bad request for evidence or denial, we share it with each other because that's how we're learning what the patterns are. With the officers, like what direction is this moving towards?
Yeah. So going back to the same point, let's say if USCIS did use AI, do I have the right to ask them, hey, did you use any machine learning or any AI system to decide this denial?
No, good
Well, let's
luck.
say if I say either I want to fight the case, is there a system from your point of view is there or it should be there where I should be able to raise my hand and say, did you use AI? And if did, what exactly happened under the hood?
There's no precedent for this kind of stuff. This is all so new. So maybe we'll see a system error that ultimately turns into a federal lawsuit. Like we will probably see that. It just hasn't happened yet. It has to get bad before it gets good. And
So
if you're a foreign national, listen, if you're an immigrant, you're here on your H1, you're just trying to stay here, man. You're just trying to be undercover. You're not trying to be like uh suing the federal government. Like I see I've seen denials where it's a great case. I'm like, we should sue the government respectfully. They're too scared. I don't want to do that. Like, I just want to stay here. Like, I'm not going to push it. I already tried to leave X country to come here for my American dream. Like, I'm not trying to be the renegade. People are scared to do things like that. It's only the bad cases that not only, but like oftentimes you get bad cases, people that have no other options. They're like, let's sue. And then unfortunately, that makes for bad case law for the rest of us because they didn't have good facts to begin with. Because you
I
can
see.
always refile. People are like, let's just refile. I'll just pay the fee. Let's just refile. I'm too scared.
Look, I agree with you 100% because I still have that fear where I don't want to mess with the government or anybody because next thing you know, I mean, there's so many things they can do to an immigrant and you never know. So that's why I think people may not, but there are chances where people, if you have nothing to lose because you already denied, you have to leave the country, whatever the situation is. And I'm sure that somebody may end up filing a lawsuit and says, you know what, I actually want to know as part of my rights, the transparency, the fairness. I'm sure there's a Fairness Act somewhere in USCIS or the government.
No,
I want to know what exactly happened.
I mean, I think maybe you're thinking about constitutional rights. We have constitutional rights, but
Yeah,
foreign
yeah.
nationals don't have full constitutional rights like citizens do. So it's not the same. And I think a lot of that, like somewhere that's coming up right now is with social media and people expressing their opinions online. I've been on this kick for a while now. It's been a year that I've been telling clients, like, hey, if you have opinions, like, please keep them to yourself. And I hate that I'm saying that. I hate it. But it's just they're checking social media. Everything is fair game. And sometimes it's like you could just, you're just giving expressing your opinion about something. But if it could be interpreted in any way as incitement or whatever, these are subjective kind of standards, your visa's at risk. So you might as well just kind of
Yeah.
tighten that up and stop for a while because it is anxiety inducing.
Yeah. So I know you have published a lot of good articles. There's a lot of good content on your LinkedIn. Wired, I think, published your article. Is that correct? Your article or
Yeah, I
your
was interviewed in a couple of articles for Wired. One of them was about protesting safely during the protests, where I was like, I had a lot of challenging conversations with some clients who wanted to protest. It's their constitutional right. Or, I'm like, I hate saying don't express your First Amendment right, but also you really have to be careful to
freedom of
not get
speech.
swept up in it. Yeah, freedom of
Yeah.
speech.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your advice as an immigrant? Do you should have freedom of speech or be careful?
I mean, it's challenging, like, okay, I can see incitement, inciting violence, like those are problematic, right? You're not going to incite a riot. But also, these are subjective, and depending on who's in office, like this could be the bad guy today, and tomorrow that's the bad guy. So I think that's dangerous when you don't have a clear guideline of what is considered protected speech and what shouldn't be, especially with respect to visas and immigration. I don't want to tell people not to express themselves and exercise their constitutional rights, but also tourists don't have the same constitutional rights as US citizens. But we also have to think as a country, what direction are we trying to go in? Many people want to immigrate to the United States because of our values, because of our the belief that you are allowed to express yourself and have an opinion and still be an American and live together in peace and harmony with others. You know, someone who my family comes from Iran, like we left Iran to come here to have the freedom to express ourselves. But when things start to when censorship starts coming into the play again, you kind of get worried. You're like, what direction are we headed? You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. No, it actually, and again, a friend of mine said she uses her common sense. Yes, she's very pissed about what's happening in the world, but she does not want to get kicked out of the country. So she would rather be quiet and do nothing and then just go with the flow. But, in a one-on-one setting, in a group setting, you can always vent out what's happening in the country. So I want to change a little bit topics because I want to understand what's coming. Well, you know, again, I know it's very hard to predict the future, and people are outside of states. They are waiting to come in. They are rethinking who are here. They are rethinking whether they should be here, they should leave, go somewhere else. And I don't want to make it a more political discussion. It's more about like let's say I'm your client, and I want to understand: should I start preparing to leave the country next couple of years, few years because of the fear, or what's the future look like? I know, things going to change in next 3.5 years, 4 years. So if as a thought leader, if you have to predict the future, what would be your guess?
Great. That's a great question. I think there's a couple things. Like one is for those already here, I'm already seeing changes in patterns and the uptick of cases that we're getting. I was just chatting with a friend about this. I've seen a really significant uptick in naturalization, citizenships.
Mm.
People who've had green cards for a long time, been permanent residents, and they were comfortable with it, are calling and they're like, I want to naturalize to become a US citizen because I want that security that they're not going to take this away from me. It's very hard to denaturalize someone. It's a lot harder to lose your citizenship than it is your green card. So that's an indicator that there is definitely a fear in the community and they want a security for it. At the same time, also, like marriage cases, family cases have increased. I think I see it, but people are because they're just like, I need to make sure I don't get separated from my fiance or my wife. I want to make sure we're together. So people are really worried about that type of effect it'll have in their life. So they're taking action more than they did before. Like I think people are a little more relaxed about it, and now they're like, this is actually really urgent. And I'm also seeing people who are asking about secondary citizenships in other countries, whether it's going back to their home country or getting a third country, like I want to consider Portugal or Canada. So this is all kind of showing like the climate that we're in. But you know what? At the end of the day, I'm long America personally. Like I love this country. And I think people maybe get surprised. They think like based on what you do, you have to have an opinion on what you think is right. I mean, I think the most important thing that I see that will be the thing that will be really valuable in the future is people who know how to communicate their differences and speak about these complex issues in a respectful way that's not going to humiliate one side or the other. I think these divisions are just causing more problems than solutions. What we
I agree.
need is to be able to like bring everyone into problem solving mode. And in order to do that, you have to speak respectfully, even to the USCIS officers. Like I'm not a fan of mouthing off like about that at all. I don't like that. I don't think it does a service to my clients. It doesn't do a service to everybody. They're just trying to do their job with outdated code, outdated systems, and these like mismatched algorithms.
I see. I have a few questions on the whole, again, I will not go into the details of the ICE operations, but I
Hmm.
do want to understand, let's say I'm on H1 visa. Somebody comes to me and asks me about the documents. I'm on H1 visa. What's going to happen to me? Like, I can just show my passport. I can just show my visa and just move on. How should I handle that situation?
It's also the application of it is the application of what's happening on the field with ICE is honestly pretty horrendous. Like it's just not the same everywhere. I'm sure you know we're seeing cases of US citizens who are wrongfully detained and questioned. You have people with valid visas. The thing is, if they're, and this is where the whole conversation we had about AI and using these and just using technology to assess like risk scores. There's these like different scores that they're assessing to people, and
Yeah,
it's based on their ethnicity. Where are you at the Home Depot? Do you have a certain skin color? Do you look a certain way? And I think this is so dangerous because now you're picking up people who are lawful citizens and they shouldn't be picked up. And then later it's like an apology tour, or it's just now we're going to release you because we weren't supposed to detain you in the first place. So I think that's wrong, but I think right now immigrants should be aware. I don't want to say live in fear. I don't want to fear monger, but you have to be wise about it. You carry at least a copy of your documents if you are in fact documented. Now, if you're not, like maybe you need to speak to an attorney about that because that's a complicated situation. But if you have a valid visa, um, have a copy of it with you.
Got it. Yeah. So license won't work. So you have to have some kind of copy. Is that correct? I'm also learning because a lot of people, I'm Indian, and sometimes people confuse me that I'm Latino or I'm Mexican. Or, when I was in Israel, people thought I'm Palestinian. They started talking random stuff to me. When I spoke, they understood my accent. They say, "Oh, you're Indian." Then they moved on. So my point is, you're saying the license will not work. You have to carry some kind of document that you're on H-1 visa or what kind of visa you are in, and then you show the document.
I mean, look, this is one of the reasons for Real ID. So Real
Oh, I
ID
see.
does work. That's kind of why they're implementing it. Legally, even if you're a green card holder or you're foreign national, you're supposed to carry your green card with you.
That's true.
No one
Yeah.
does that because it's a
Yeah.
law that's not enforced. It hasn't been enforced until very recently. There was actually a case, I think it was out of Chicago last week. This US, I think he was a green card holder or a US citizen. He didn't have his green card with him, and they fined him.
They find him?
They fined him.
Wow.
They found him in the system, ultimately, let him go, but not without giving him a fine and a citation for not carrying his green card.
Wow.
So this is a law on the books that you're supposed to carry your green card with you at all times. Do I tell people to do it? No, because no one does it.
I
It has
didn't do
not
it.
been enforced. Yeah, it hasn't been enforced, but you should do it. And I don't like the fact that this is happening because this is definitely a slippery slope. Like what's next? Like how do they determine, like, do I have to have my passport with me? Because that's not a rule. I'm a US citizen, but maybe I look like I'm a LPR, like you were mentioning, in your case, like people mistake you for a foreign national.
Yeah.
And so they'll be like, where are your papers? So I think it's a slippery slope. And if you look at history, especially in this country, the times when we've done things like that was during Japanese internment. Of course, in Nazi Germany, they did that as
Yeah.
well. Like the show your papers stuff, like I don't like that. I think that's really dangerous. And so I don't think that's the answer either.
Yeah. So, Aida, as part of the closing, if I ask you that what message do you want to share with USCIS or the policymakers using AI responsibility or fixing the system, things that you may want to see or you want to see changing in with full empathy for your clients and also full empathy for the government too, because they also want to make sure they're not bringing the wrong people to the country. What message would you share?
Look, I believe in challenging systems without dehumanizing the people who work in them. So my place isn't to point fingers at USCIS workers or the government. Bureaucracy is bureaucracy, but it's made up of humans who are following rules. But I think if you are in that position, I'm sure they see inefficiencies and problems as well, and that they're in a really great position to work with people in the private sector and others to come up with better solutions on how to put some guardrails on whatever risk scoring is happening in the AI, and B, like remember the empathy and human approach behind these stories. If you think about the history of immigration or the purpose and way this country was formed, like you need to remember our history and what direction we want to go. And so it's hard when you're working your job and you have 12 minutes per file and you got to stamp through it. But of course you're affecting the lives of people. And I think a lot of officers do take that job very seriously. And we should also recognize that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. You keep saying about the guardrails, AI guardrails. And I do want to set, I want to share something with you. The startup that I have, of course, I'm not promoting my startup, but the startup is all about AI trust. So, when we started the company, we started with governance and security. We focused on guardrails. We focused on the AI visibility, going back to the transparency conversation. But the problem that we saw or we learned from our customers, they said, dude, that's a day one problem, the guardrails, security, and governance. I said, so what's a day zero problem? Day zero problem is an accuracy problem. Going back to your point, that if you have enough context about these people in USCIS system, they can make their AI can make accurate decisions and more AI will be used. So, for example, the example I give to my customers all the time. Let's say, Ida is my customer. Ida is expecting a number 123 from AI application, but she's seeing a number 321. Now she's going to come back to me, and she's going to say, "Dude, I'm not going to use this application because it's spitting out garbage." Right?
Yeah.
Because it's not accurate. The reason it's not accurate because there's not enough context about that data set that you're talking to. And I believe, as I'm sure, so based on my research, USCIS is in a very early stage of co-piloting or using large language models.
Yeah.
I hope that as they start implementing more AI into their systems, they are able to, or they can understand the AI accuracy problem on day zero, so that when the system is in place, the need of those guardrails and their trust minimize because accuracy is there, right? And I hope that they're considering all those things in advance. Either so, how do you feel? How do you feel about the future?
How do I feel about the future? How do you feel about the future?
I
Tell me
look,
first.
I feel great because crypto is doing great, and
You always
stock
bring up
market
crypto when we chat. It always comes up at some point. It's funny, but I'm
because
happy for you.
no, no. And the reason I bring up crypto, because if you look at going back to China, right? If you look at and going back to digital currencies, because the future is about all digital currencies. Eventually, whatever is going on in the market, in the economy right now, there is a need where you have alternate ways of doing business besides swiping out your credit cards and other things. And I strongly believe that few things needs to change when it comes to government, the way when it comes to the impulsiveness of making those decisions.
Hmm.
Because my personal take is that overnight when something gets decided, and I always think about small businesses. Like, you have your own firm. Now let's say if I'm running my own firm and suddenly something happened last night because somebody tweeted about it, and now I have to worry about what should I do next to survive. So if we can figure out a way to fix those things, the what's this called unpredictability in the system, I think I will feel way, way better about the future.
Hmm.
Yeah. How about you?
Are you feeling kind of concerned as it is now? Like, do you think the trajectory right now is a little bit alarming or
100%. I mean,
exciting?
100%. I mean, there's a reason that gold and silver prices are going up, because big shots, big whales who are investing so much money, their clients' money, they are worried about the tariffs, they're worried about n number of things, and they don't know what's next, right? And that's one of the
Yeah.
reasons people are putting money into more safe assets, which is gold and silver. I think we are heading in the direction where if things don't change from the tariffs and many other things, I think we may encounter something where a government may have to decide in the favor of country, people, rather than just building out the new systems or new policies. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's your
I mean,
take?
I think I'm okay. This is kind of maybe this is controversial, but I think when I look at the immediate future anyway, when I look at the direction things seem to be headed, I think globalization is over. I think it's going the
Yeah.
opposite direction. I think we're bringing everyone back. You know, we're reshoring, maybe nearshoring, but like globalization was such a beautiful concept and it was like so cool when it was first happening and we're like we can work together anywhere, everyone, but I think right now, like the dynamics and power has shifted so much with technology, with the AI race. I mean, there's just so many factors going into the geopolitical climate, the economic climate, and stability and instability globally that I think it's like nations are almost like self isolating, or that's what I think is going to start happening. Is countries are going to be bringing things back and having a little bit more of a siloed approach, which is what it used to be like.
My God, you
And I don't,
absolutely right. Yeah. Sorry, you absolutely read my mind, because I come from a strong data background, and I always tell my customers, do not create the silos of the data, because your data can get hacked and it's going to be hard to control. I'm so glad you mentioned that. And that's exactly what I think, subconsciously I was heading into the direction, that the way silo approach rather than being one global piece that we're working towards. So the silo approach is a little scary, because now we are fighting with each other from the technology point of view, and from overall how we are doing business.
yeah, and it's hard, and I don't know what's better. Like, I don't know how it's gonna pan out, but I know that they didn't figure out a way to all we didn't figure out a way to work together, nation as a nation. So like this is kind of the way it's gonna have to be. And so I think that will definitely be a shift, and I think that's why the governments are also putting so much money into AI and the next wave of technologies that are coming, getting to AGI and all these things. Like, this is
Yeah.
why they care so much because you're like, we're in a new dimension of a race right now.
Yeah. And then there's a parallel race of quantum computing in parallel.
Yes. And I just like read way too much science fiction as a kid. And I think about it all the time. I'm like, these things are real. They're all coming
I
true.
mean, they are real. Look what's happening right now, right? They are real. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was great. And as things changes, I would love to have you back on my show because
Always.
things are moving so fast. I'm sure next 2 months there will be a new law, and we will talk about it.
Yes. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Neeraj. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Ida.
Take care.